Hello beautiful people, I'm RaishPhoenix, and in today's video we're going to be doing a sketchbook tour. I started this sketchbook in May of 2019. My intentions with this was to just do whatever I want. Now I will say doing a sketchbook tour might be a little bit ironic because I am dominantly a digital illustrator. If you've been checking out some of my previous time lapses or speed paints, you'll see that most of the time I'm working digital. Bringing that back to why I got the sketchbook, I was at a point in my creative process where I noticed that I was just focused on getting the best piece. Like with my digital work, I wanted to create the most, the most perfect illustration. I was hard on myself about my line work, about my color palette, and just my ability to capture different values and different hues and getting the best out of my work. But the issue with being in that definitely perfectionist state was that I was limiting myself. I was distancing myself from what I appreciated most about art, the ability to just create, to leave room for mistakes, to allow myself to experiment. So this sketchbook became a way for me to have that outlook. In this sketchbook, I have definitely been using it for mixed media reasons. So you'll see that I have graphite work, I have watercolor, gouache, and ink. Now, being that I said that this is my do whatever I want sketchbook and I was just giving myself full room to be as experimental as possible, I will say that the sketchbook isn't finished yet. And you'll also see that I have a couple unfinished pieces in here. A decent amount of these pieces are unfinished, but I still wanted to take the time to share it with you guys, so I hope you enjoy this video. Starting off with our first page, I think during this point I was trying to get better at face studies. I'm not sure if I was looking over maybe some anatomy for skulls and just the different placement. Like you can see that I'm using different guidelines here. I'm being mindful of the corner of the eyes matching up with the ending point or the inner corner of the eye. I'm paying attention to the middle of the eye meeting up with the outside of the mouth. I say that my intentions with this first piece was to just give myself some room to work with what I knew already in terms of just face studies and my understanding of how I was taught. I feel like I maybe learned this in high school. Yeah, I feel like during portraiture when I was learning it in high school, that was when I was introduced to these areas that line up on the face. So I was just utilizing that with this first piece. Over here is a super light sketch. I was definitely practicing anatomy, being super loose about it. I think at this point I was wondering or trying to figure out if I wanted to use both sides of the pages in the sketchbook. Spoiler alert, definitely didn't. I stick to one side because I slowly started to learn that because I wanted to work with gouache and watercolor more so watercolor, I found that this type of mixed media, if you're using gouache, something that's a little bit heavier on the page, I feel like it works better. For this, I decided to just sketch some anatomy poses, and this was probably the only time in this entire sketchbook that you'll see me work on this side. Moving on to this side, I wanted to work with a limited color palette, at least from looking at this. I think that's what my intentions were. I'm not exactly sure if I was inspired by the picture I was referencing for the colors that I chose or not. Purple is my favorite color, so it's fitting that I went with this color. You know, now that I think about it, being that this was my do whatever I want, this was me experimenting. This was me just, drawing a sketch, capturing a pose, and then from there applying color to it. For this one, I was doing a sketch of Chadwick Boseman. I believe that this was maybe a screenshot from the Black Panther movie. I believe my intentions were to keep it in graphite. I wasn't going to add any type of color or anything, just keeping it in grayscale, using very sketchy lines to render out areas like the beard and the inner portions like closer to where the nose meets up with the upper eyebrow. Again, just giving myself room to experiment. For this piece, I feel like I wanted to capture some type of freedom element, having a woman who's looking up to the sky, also giving her flowy clothes. This might have also been around the time I had gotten a pastel watercolor set, or at least just wanted to utilize it. Started off with a graphite sketch of just getting the pose right. I think also I wanted to figure out how I would draw a neck. Like if somebody's looking fully up, how would I render that neck? Looking at it now, I definitely don't think I used reference. I think that I mean, maybe there's a possibility that I looked up in the mirror and like did a side glance. I was just like, okay, let me try to do that. But I think that I was just trying to experiment here with my understanding of anatomy and just creating something that was a symbol of freedom or just letting go. Moving on to this piece, it's a watered down gouache piece. My intentions were to bring it further to a more rendered gouache painting, but again, the sketchbook has a bunch of unfinished pieces and sketches. This piece is of Kelly Eden. She's an incredibly talented artist. She has beautifully rendered oil paintings. She's also been sharing her drapery projects. And honestly, I just want to let her work speak for itself. So I'm actually going to tag her YouTube in the description box. And I'm also going to put her socials here on the screen. Kelly, if you end up watching this, I love you, girl. You're so talented. And it's just been really dope to see her creating. And I know that she said she has intentions to update her channel with more of her work and to start a series. Definitely excited for seeing that. I decided to draw this piece of her because there was something so beautiful and serene about this picture when she shared it. I loved the color of her hair. She had this beautiful blue hair and just the scenery of the grass, laying in the grass and the trees behind her. This pose was such like a relaxed pose and I felt connected to the energy in this picture, so I decided to draw it. These little yellow areas that I had put here were for the flowers. I was just spotting where I can like loosely render them into place. I was focusing first on using lighter tones to capture light, like a yellow hue tone to capture light, a little bit of more of a warmer tone to capture where shadows were starting to begin, and then the cooler tones for where the deeper shadows can be found. On this page, I was practicing face studies. I started off first with a graphite lead pencil. I believe it's 0.7 millimeters that I work with. Lied. It's 0.5 millimeters. This is the pencil that I use to sketch. So 0.5 millimeter lead pencil. I went in and did these sketches. I know that this is definitely Little Moonchild on Instagram. For the other two reference, I can't remember. I know that I may have referenced this creator from a makeup post, either that I randomly came across on Instagram or from a beauty page that I follow posting them. I can't exactly remember, but I loved his makeup. He was sickening. 8. So I decided to draw him as well. For this last one, I believe that it was an image that I came across from on Google. You can see that I never finished outlining it, so I was using a micron for all these. So I started off with the graphite pencil and then I used a micron, most likely this one, and then I do have the black microns in other sizes, but yeah, definitely use that on these. This next piece is of Christy Mack. I am blocking it out with Post-its, the area, because she is wearing a sheer bodysuit. I didn't fully render these areas yet. As you can see, again, another unfinished piece. I decided to draw this pose because, first of all, I adore Christy Mack. Like, I adore her. Like, when she first started, I loved the mohawk, the black mohawk. Her tattoos, like the lovesick on her hand, I thought was just so dope. On top of that, she is an absolute sweetheart, super supportive. You can see that she constantly speaks on giving back to other communities, donating. That is why I decided to draw her. For this particular piece, I remember that she was sitting in, I guess it would be called a hammock, like a wooden hammock. There were these pillows with stripes on them, and it was a light blue color, so this is pretty accurate to, I think, well actually maybe it was a darker blue. I can't tell you, because it was a while ago that I had started this. I've noticed that whenever I am drawing a figure, it's a lot easier for me to draw figures that don't have that much overlapping parts. And I think that for this pose, it was a little bit more of a challenge because although her limbs aren't overlapping that much, you do see her arm going over her torso, and then her leg is bent, and then her arm is bent over here as well. With that being said, I think that I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more to capture a pose where it's more relaxed, but even though it's relaxed, there are overlapping areas that are going to challenge me a bit. Also, I think I just really loved the color palettes in this, and that was something very relaxing about it. The blue pattern on the pillows mixed with the brown hammock that she was in. I'm going to call it a hammock. I hope to God that hammock is the right word. All I know is that this was a chair that was wooded, and you could see the bars here. I didn't fully render out this area yet. I didn't like finish it, but we're gonna call it a hammock. And if I'm using the wrong word, you know what I mean. Y'all know what I mean. Anyway, I wanted to capture the pose, and then also I just really loved the environment that this shot was taken in. I am going to link her most recent interview in the description box below. I think that she shares her story in a very beautiful way. A story that should be told and heard. Moving on to this next one, it's of Megan Thee Stallion. Had to do that. So for this one, I think this might have been around when Big Ol' Freak, Big Booty Big Ol' Treat came out, either then or so, I don't know. But all I know is that I was like, she is dope, she is fire, I want to draw her. And you'll see that I definitely draw artists a lot, like recording artists, because I'm deeply moved by music, and it's kind of like my way of giving back their energy to the universe. Like if me listening to their song is inspiring me and motivating me to create art, then finding a picture of them that I feel drawn to and drawing that and putting it back out into the universe is my way of kind of like creating that cyclic energy exchange. For this one of Megan, I'm pretty sure I started in graphite, and then after that I did a watered down gouache. For the hair, I believe my intentions were to experiment with a different color for the line work. So instead of just using a stark black, I decided to go in with a purple that's kind of, or bluish type of purple hue that is still a deeper shade. You can see how the vibrancy is coming through, and then also just capturing her hair that was red, but instead going in with like a neonish pink hued color. For this next one, I decided to draw my sand shrew. I think at this point I was like, I have so many items in my room. Why am I not looking at the items in my room as inspiration? Because there have been moments where even for my makeup tutorials where I wanted to come up with a color combo, didn't really know what to do. I looked around my room and I was just like, look at that Gundam, look at that Transformer, look at that anime statue. Like there's so many different options for color combos and so many different inspirations that I was like, duh. Draw sand shrew. So start off with a graphite sketch per usual. The challenge with this one was definitely drawing something that is technically a white object, but depending on how it's lit, depending on the items that are around it, it'll play into other hues being shown on that particular item. There were definitely times when I worked on it at night and more so in the day, which would play a part in the warmer hues and the cooler hues that came through. I actually do have the process for this available on my YouTube, so I'm going to link that in the description box as well for you guys to check out. For the eyes, I feel like I went in with ink. I do have, is it India ink? I'm not sure, but I have ink. I'll insert a clip of the ink that I use, and I went in just for the eyes to capture that dark and stark color there. This next piece, I noticed that I had a habit of just drawing People, I mean, people are my dominant subject matter, you know, like I do enjoy drawing people, but you know, the people need to be put in spaces, so maybe I should practice environments as well. I may have come across this reference image either on Instagram, maybe I Googled it, keep it a buck with you, can't remember, but I decided to start sketching out this area, kind of testing my ability to capture perspective. I didn't really lay down, I don't think I laid down any specific way of capturing the perspective, like putting a, what is it called? Girl, I ain't done perspective in a minute, don't ask me. But anyway, I didn't put down a specific formula. Let's call it a formula for capturing the perspective. I just looked at the picture and said, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna draw it, and this is what I ended up with. Again, didn't really get that far, but we got a couch. We got a couch. Moving on to this next piece, I was definitely working off of a prompt. For this one, you can see that I'm definitely revisiting that serene type of feeling, being calm, being relaxed. Because of the fashion pages that I follow, or just like clothing store pages that I follow, I saw a sheer top with black dots. Can we still consider that polka dots? Polka dots? Dots, whatever. There were dots on the top, and I wanted to incorporate that into this drawing. I have a pretty strong feeling that there may have been somebody wearing a bow with a bell, being inspired by whatever imagery that I come across, and I don't think I ever drew a character with a hat. Just incorporating things I've never done before or things that I was inspired by. And looking at the trees outside of my window, I wanted to play with a different type of framing, and then also just capturing that freedom of the trees and seeing them blow in the wind. Adding elements that I basically knew would help with capturing this free and relaxed state. For this next piece, again, pretty sure I was working off of a prompt. Couldn't really tell you what this was for, but I can see how I have elements of the universe. Having her earrings be different moon phases, her hair mimicking clouds, having her wear a dress that has different sparkles on it. Pretty sure that I used ink washes on her face, and then for everywhere else it was rendered out with gouache. I definitely started off with ink washes overall. Even looking over here, I can see some of the areas where the ink wash is coming through, but it wasn't capturing the depth that I wanted. And because I haven't worked with ink for so long, I felt like the gouache would give me more of the depth and room to cover it up and fix it. There's also maybe a possibility I made a mistake, you know, on the background, and the gouache just made it a little bit more forgiving to fix those areas. Even with the hair and adding these highlights right here, I feel like I had difficulty in some of these areas just figuring out how to capture more light, and because I eliminated that opportunity with the ink washes I had put down, I decided to go back in with white gouache. I remember that figuring out how to incorporate these sparkle details over here was kind of a challenge that I was looking forward to. I was like, okay, I've never drawn sparkles before. How would I render that? And I decided to go in with kind of like light tapping motions for these areas, and then just incorporating lighter values to really add that popping effect. Finishing off with the micron, a thin micron for the eyes, to add a contrast to the deep value of her dress, just bringing that back into the eyes to, you know, kind of have 3 different points where we could look at on this piece that have depth to it, and it didn't feel like it was too light in just this area of her face where details could potentially get lost. This is just a sketch. I wanted to do something kind of like with someone being kind of engulfed by flames. I'm not sure if my intentions were to be like this person is suffering, so that's the flames engulfing them, or if my perspective was more on the other side of this person has a bunch of power within them and is kind of suffering from that. Like, I'm not sure if it was a within or without thing, but I know that I was definitely going to incorporate a flame right here with where these light areas are. I for sure took a picture of myself as reference doing this pose, and you can see the areas within the head and kind of like over here with the arm, like the shoulder would have been, where I was just figuring out how to render those areas. This piece is of Soza Micah's OC. I will link her post, her Instagram post, in the description box below so you can see her work. And then also she has a YouTube, so I'm going to link that too. I'm going to link her YouTube and I'm going to link the Instagram. I hope she posted on her Instagram. I came across it on Twitter. Anyway, I'm rambling. But she did a Draw This in Your Style challenge, and I decided to draw her OC. I really loved the character design. I never worked with this type of tone for somebody's flesh, or even the color palette for the eyes. This was definitely at the height of my experimentation with gouache and just introducing myself to that medium, because I never worked with it before 2019 when I had started this sketchbook. I remember this was a point where I was also just trying to get brushes that would be thin enough to capture like the little details, like right here along the top, even just figuring out how I wanted to do the line work in the hair and what colors I wanted to use. Looking at it now, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think that the line work looks pretty good, and I really love even how I render the eyes, like the intensity of it, the vibrancy, and even capturing, like figuring out how I wanted to capture the tongue sticking out. I definitely really like this color palette. This was another Draw This in Your Style challenge that I never finished because I was struggling. Again, how I said I was figuring out gouache, I didn't understand how much of a color to add a flushed look to the face. So over here, like these areas constantly were working. And I remember that I had wet the page intentionally to lift the color, and I was constantly reworking the hue of her skin. I didn't know if I wanted it to be more on the red side or more on the orange side. The hair is probably the only point where you can see that like my brush strokes look a little bit more confident here. But with the face, figuring out the values and the hues, it was tripping me up. And this is how far this piece got. I'm gonna insert the artist's original piece because I loved their piece and I loved how they designed this character, but Jesus, it was a trip for me to render this right, so you can see how I never finished it because of that reason. For this one, this is actually a screenshot from Christina Aguilera's music video. I'm blanking on the name. I'm gonna put the name on the screen of her music video. It was her, and I believe she's featuring 2 Chainz in that song. There's a scene in that music video where she is standing posed, and you can just see that she has oil. It looks like baby oil. I can't remember, but anyway, it looked like baby oil or some oil of some sort, and she just has it dripping over her, and there was something about that that just looked really dope. I remember there was like this warm, like the warm pink and yellow hues in that shot, and just I wanted to test my ability to capture the transparency but also the luminosity of the oil, because although it was clear and you can see through it, there were areas where you can see the light was reflecting off of it and creating these little white streaks. I didn't get that far, as you can see, but it's kind of just the beginning point of figuring out values. Working with gouache, that was definitely my approach to figure out where I see light, midtones, and deeper tones. And that was the groundwork of everything that's on this page and where I had left it at during that point. For this next one, it was actually a drawing of Colored Rain's, I believe they were promoting their Juicy Boost palette. They had this beautiful, deep, rich toned model wearing vibrant yellow hair, and also I just loved the aesthetic of the jacket that she was wearing and the lightning bolt earrings. I thought it was so dope and I wanted to capture that. I started off with a graphite sketch, and then from there I started to introduce values with the gouache. With this, there was probably a point where I wanted to introduce more colors than what was initially in the photo, because I definitely have a habit of, okay, this is the photo, I want to capture it, but I also want to kind of test my ability to add more to what I'm seeing. And I believe that's where I fell off from finishing this piece, because I didn't really know how I wanted to push the blue or even the yellow or the pink in the jacket. I wasn't really sure what hues I wanted to incorporate from there, or if I wanted to keep it the same. So this is as far as that sketch got. This next one is a drawing of Saweetie. In her Back to the Streets music video, there's a shot of her where Jhené Aiko is doing her verse, and you see Saweetie and she has like this light blue hair, and there's something just so ethereal about that shot. And I loved this pose where she had been looking up, and I believe that she had her umbrella that was made out of flower petals and she was holding it. I wanted to capture that moment. I believe I wanted to use gouache with this, and I knew also that this was a challenging pose because I do not usually draw kind of like that under and looking up point of view, and I wanted to challenge myself to capture that perspective of somebody's face. Looking at it now, you know, I think I did a pretty decent job with how far I've got this in the graphite sketch, but I think that I was just so thrown off by drawing something in a new perspective that I didn't even try to get to color. I was just like, that's enough. This is as far as we're getting. It is what it is. This next page, this pretty much encapsulates the I do whatever I want, because I don't know what I was doing. I just wanted to draw colors, you know? I know for a fact I wasn't using reference. I was challenging myself to draw a face based off of whatever came to mind, while also trying to challenge myself to draw a curly hair texture using colors that were vibrant. Looking at it now, I feel like I just wanted to start off with the base color. I'm not sure at this point if I fully understood capturing warm hues in the skin, or even just lighter values where they play off of a different hue on the skin. You can definitely see how her complexion is just one hue. Pretty sure I used one color and that was it. So this is definitely a very simplified piece that I didn't know where to go with from this direction, so unfinished once again. This next one is of Mareep. So I actually have a Mareep in my room. When I think about it, like, my brother collected a bunch of Pokemon keychains and Pokemon statues. I was looking through them and I was like, which one would I want to draw? And I saw Mareep. I love Ampharis. There's something about Ampharis, and I think it was in the Silver game, finding Ampharis in the lighthouse, or whatever it was that you had to do with helping Ampharis in the lighthouse. For some reason, when I was younger and I got into that part in the journey, I had just grown attached to Ampharis. I even have an Ampharis plushie. So I saw Mareep and I was like, let's draw Mareep. At this point, I feel like it's finished. Technically, it's not. Technically, because I know that I want to go back in and add more values to certain areas, but looking at it, I think that I did a pretty good job with just diversifying the values and maybe parts of the face, even capturing some, you know what, now that I think about it, I'm looking at it and I feel like some of these greenish going into like blue grayish hues, maybe towards the bottom I could have pushed more depth in that area to kind of help contrast with the ears and the tail, like the deeper values there. But honestly, looking at this, I'm pretty happy with where it is. I don't think that this is a piece that I would want to go back in and finish because it looks fine. And this really is just my do whatever I want sketchbook, so that's where she's at. This next one, I was challenging myself to work with a limited color palette. I had just gotten my Ohuhu markers. I forgot what set, but it was maybe like a 20 set or so, but I didn't have a lot of variety, and I was like, okay, if I don't have a lot of variety, I still want to challenge myself to work with this new medium, because it had been years since I've worked with markers. Digressing a little bit, one of the biggest things that irritated me was using a marker of any color you want and then going in with a yellow on top to add some detail, and you look at the yellow, like the tip of the marker, and it's just bleeding with another color. I hated that. So I was like, I haven't used markers in a while. I see everybody going crazy with Copics, drawing some sickening pieces. Let me reintroduce markers to myself, which is what led to me buying Ohuhu's set. With that being said, again, I had a limited color palette. I don't think there was really much flesh tones in the set that I had gotten because it was such a low number. So I decided to do a limited color palette of yellows and oranges, and then from there I went in with some color pencil to further push the values in this piece. For the hair, I may have went in with ink. I think that I have an ink brush pen that I was using for this area, but I had run out of ink. So you can see the hair is definitely not finished in these other areas. And the sketch, I started with a blue color pencil to keep it light. So when I went in with the markers, it wouldn't show through where I put the colors down. Keeping the theme of working with markers, once I had gotten that smaller set of markers, I decided to buy an even bigger set. I believe that they had a sale at this point. Got the 120 set, and then eventually later on I got the pastel set. This is a picture of Arnell Armand, and kind of what I do with like recording artists. I decided to draw her because I was super inspired by her and just the content she was posting about being herself. I found that my main challenge with markers and the set that I have, even now, even with the extended colors that I've gotten, is that you'll have a hue, but it's not exactly a yellow hue. Like, I feel like there's a lot of pink hues, but when I wanted something that would fit more of like a melanated complexion, it was kind of harder to find that yellow hue because the closest you would get to that yellow, it would start hitting like a mid-tone. So I definitely beat myself up a lot about just getting the right complexion for her skin. I was also figuring out how I would lay down the marker brush strokes, if I was going to use like a tapping motion or if I was going to kind of figure out more of how I wanted to put down the brush strokes based off of the area that I was drawing and how that kind of played into a part of how her skin looked and the lighting on that particular part. Again, working with lighter value, that's always been like my process, even with watercolor. I put down the lighter values first and then from there midtones and then deeper tones. There are some areas in this where you can see I was trying to push the color palette, like the green hues in the hair. There's a little bit of purple and pink incorporated over here in the shadows, and even the blues in her eyebrows. Another way I was just trying to diversify the color palette, even though I felt limited in some areas for her complexion. I wanted to still challenge myself to push in other areas where I had colors where I could incorporate it. This is a point where I'd say I was definitely getting a better hang for markers. Even just figuring out the strokes I wanted to use, like what was the motion I would incorporate to capture the texture of her hair. For here, I use my Jelly Roll pen, my white Jelly Roll pen for like the areas of her lips, the reflection, as well as color pencils to help push more of the hues here in like to the sides of her eyes and for some areas underneath the chin. I knew that I wanted to use the direction of the markers to also help with capturing the particular area that I was rendering out. So if I'm rendering out the area underneath her eye, because this is generally a motion that goes like this, I would make sure that when I put down the brush strokes, I'm going to say brush strokes even though they're markers, when I put down the brush strokes, I would go in that same area to really help with rendering out the form and pushing it in the areas that I wanted to capture that with. You can see in certain areas of her neck and even the top of her chest, like the clavicle, how I have more of those brush strokes exposed, and you can see a little bit more loosely. It was definitely my intention to keep this bottom area more loose and to focus more of the detail in her eyes and in her face to really push that area. Again, another marker piece. You can find this video on my channel as well. I'll link both of these videos in the description box for you guys. This is of Rico Nasty. I loved her hair and her makeup. Her makeup artist has also worked with Doechii and I'm trying to remember. She's worked with SZA. Her work is just really dope. Like her ability to capture different lines and different shapes on the face is really dope. I remember I decided to go in with watercolor in certain areas because, again, felt limited by the complexion options in my Ohuhu set, so I decided to mix those colors, those values, those lighter but warmer values with my watercolor and bring that into the face. And I believe some parts of the hand I did that as well. For the hair, I used the brush strokes to further help showing the direction in which the hair was moving. With the eyes and some parts of her lip, you can see that I used a jelly roll pen to create those light highlights. In the hand and certain parts of the eyes, I went in with color pencils to help further carve and add like a stark line to that area so it pops out more. This was a beginning sketch of Megan Thee Stallion. I feel like this was maybe a green outfit that she was wearing. If I can find the picture, I'll put it on the screen. I really loved this outfit. I remember the design of it stood out to me a lot and I wanted to draw it. But at this point, before I discovered gesture drawing and just my ability to capture the form in a more fluid way, you can see that I'm carving out more of the areas like here going into her back and just capturing her muscles like the deltoid. I got too caught up in carving out parts of the body that I kind of fell off. There's a decent amount of areas where you can see that once it started getting challenging and I didn't really know what to do, I was like, I'm gonna leave it. This is good enough. Here is a sketch of Lizzo. She had pink hair. I really liked how there were these little bows created by the way her hair was styled, and I really loved kind of just how her eyes look so relaxed in this, like the way her lids are positioned. I don't know how to better explain that, but you guys see the expression I'm talking about. Her mouth is relaxed, it's open and relaxed, and just gently touching her face right here at the edge. She also had nails with hearts on the ends. I didn't get to the point where I had put the nails. You can see some light areas, but I kept reworking the hands because the placement was off. This was the base sketch and I was eventually going to bring in markers with this, but again, another one of those pieces where I brought it to a certain point. Wanted to bring in the markers, but something else took my attention, like some other piece had gotten my attention at that point. So you can already see the reference here of Laura. She's one of the CEOs of Melt Cosmetics. I wanted to try capturing her tattoos. Chrissy Mack was probably the first drawing in this that I feel like I was drawing somebody who had a bunch of tattoos on them. But I wanted to challenge myself to capture this pose, kind of an over-the-shoulder look. I really love the deep chocolate lipstick, the way her hair is flowing. The challenge for me was definitely capturing this angle. I feel like whenever somebody's face is at an angle, like a slight angle, it throws me off a bit. So you can see that maybe I captured the shape of her eyes correctly, but because this pose is challenging, I didn't really know how to like angle the paper. So there are some areas where you can definitely see how I was thrown off by that, but I feel like this is still a pretty good starting point. This was another piece of Megan Thee Stallion that I was doing. These are actually swatches. So whenever I'm doing a marker piece, I have swatches to show myself what are the colors that I want to use and how do they look next to each other. It helps a ton. In areas of her face and even the neck, you can see where I was trying to incorporate different hues, like green hues, blue hues, to further push the color palette. Starting off with a light base for the hair to get a feel for how I wanted to capture the texture. With this one, I only got as far as just capturing the lighter hues. I can't really tell you the reason why I didn't finish this. I think something else took my attention, honestly, because looking at this, I don't feel like there was a particular part where I started to get or experience difficulty with it. I mean, maybe there was, I'm not sure, but with that being said, you know, this is as far as it got. This next one, again, you can see that I swatched the colors, so I would figure out how they would look next to each other and just get a good feel for the range of value. I was drawing Doja Cat from one of her live performances. I think it was like a live session for Vivo or something, but she had this cat outfit on. Like, I just loved the fur in her top. Her top was like a kind of off the shoulder bodysuit. and then fluffy ears that matched as well. I just really loved this look. With this one, I believe my initial approach was to think of it in a two-tone lighting to capture the blue hues or the lighter cool toned hues, while also taking into consideration the pink hues. Again, I feel like there are some areas where you can see like that slight shift in face. Like there's something about that slight shift plus figuring out the angling and position of the eyes that throws me off just the slightest bit. So I feel like I definitely had a challenge with capturing that, but I still feel like this is a pretty good base to work off of. You can see that there are also parts of the hair where I was capturing the curl with the brush strokes, just really trying to push and render that area out for the groundwork of eventually adding deeper values. And then for this final one, it was a pencil sketch. Again, just practicing capturing faces. Like how I mentioned in the previous drawing of Doja Cat, I struggle with that slightly off-center turning, like where it's like a little bit of 3/4 but a little bit of frontal mixed with a head tilt. Like it throws me off. So because I knew that I kind of wanted a reset from there, I decided to draw a pose where the subject is positioned forward, where you're just getting a front profile of them. You can see here how there are lines that I was using as guides to make sure that I'm balancing out the face evenly and being considerate of the left side of the face and the right side. With this one, I believe my approach was just being mindful of how even though somebody's looking forward, you can still see on the left side of their face or the right side how certain areas may appear smaller, like how they have those memes of people where one eye is bigger than the other. It's like if you spend enough time just looking at somebody's face, you'll see the areas of imperfections, but I'll also call it beauty because there's beauty in those imperfections. Like you'll see the areas of their face where maybe this eye is slightly smaller than the other one, or maybe you can see how on this side of their face the jawbone is more rounded, but then on this side it's more angular and kind of like a sharper start cut. So I was pushing myself to see and find those areas on the face so that I can better capture the subject that I was referencing. And that completes our sketchbook tour. Thank you so much for watching this video. I was a little bit nervous about showing my sketchbook. There's so many pieces that are unfinished in this, but I was inspired by seeing other artists who are doing sketchbook tours. I was thinking to myself, I don't think I have enough pieces to do that. And lo and behold, the sketchbook came through. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Bless up, and until next time, sending out much peace, love, and enlightenment. Bye, guys.